Hello and welcome back to the 2 by 2. It's the new year. We're recording new episodes, and we could not kick off our new year with a better person than Amanda Nizzere. Amanda is a successful fractional CMO. She has only been doing this for 2 years. She's reached full capacity plus, which we're going to hear some of the secrets behind how she did that. She also, on the side, can't sit still like me and has a podcast called Female Fractionals, and I met through Chief, which is the source of a lot of our guests, and I love the fact that it is. She focuses on marketing for professional services, which I can tell you as a professional services provider, marketing is a critical gap in many of our capability sets. So no wonder you've been successful, but I'm sure a lot of it is because of you, because you are fabulous. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Me too. I think one of the reasons that I wanted to have a deeper discussion with you was because you have not only been successful in your own work, but through your podcast, you've been able to speak deeply with a lot of other fractional executives. And so I love when we have a guest on that's done that because not only do you bring your own set of insights, but you also have captured and gathered the insights from a larger group of people, which I think adds a lot of value to everybody. I want to start there. Normally, I kind of get a backstory on you, but let's actually start with the group of people that you've spoken to. What are you seeing as some of the lessons that float to the top across the board?
Yeah. Yeah. I think in my discussions, I think the thing that's really surprised me the most is how consistent the lessons are, regardless of the fractional function, the industry, or the years of experience. And so I think there's several themes that tend to come up again and again across the podcast and the discussions. And that's one which I think won't be a surprise to anyone, and that's pricing. Pricing is harder than anyone expects. They will have a formula in their mind, and then they'll have like a conversation or two, and it might just throw everything that they believed out the window. I think especially in the beginning, but it's clearly absolutely foundational for the success of the business. Also, niching is a conversation that comes up often as well, and the importance of really niching down. And I think often, again, like in the beginning, but I think I even saw it too, like as I talked to people that were a little bit further along in the journey, they tended to maybe want to start to widen the aperture a little bit, but remembering that niching down actually accelerates opportunities instead of limiting it. And then sales and business development that never stops being a part of the job. So again, like professional services marketer for professional services people. That's definitely always top of mind. Another thing is that mistakes are inevitable. They are something that it's going to happen to you, but they're survivable. I like to say like fail and fail fast is key in this business. And then I think another thing, and this comes up in a lot of my conversations, but I think it's one that I really value, and you mentioned it already, but like community amongst the fractionals. It's a true multiplier. And so I I have found that to be just a really great part of my experience. I think one thing too that comes up is that in the conversations that I have with people, they're talking about these big things like pricing and value proposition and who am I going to serve and what are the offers I'm going to provide. It's really like how earned each of these lessons are. So like every fractional that I've interviewed or talked to in the communities that I'm a part of, they've learned a lot of these lessons kind of the hard way, whether it's through like underpricing or scope creep or misaligned clients or launching something that maybe didn't work. But the ones that really thrive, they don't spiral when this happens. Again, it's kind of like to the fail fast mentality. Like they adjust, they learn, and they move on. And so I think there's a pattern in almost everyone that I've talked to that like they didn't nail it right away, but they just gained clarity and resilience, and then that is what has separated some of the really sustainable fractionals from those that are feeling like they're maybe doing more like project-based work, or they're wavering a little bit, or they're feeling like they're getting more short-term gigs and not really getting a lot of like the more referral-based businesses.
That is great. So we got 5 here. niching down, sales always top of mind, mistakes, and then community as a multiplier. I started another list here of like what are the traits, like the soft traits that
Mhm.
one needs. So we'll put resilience on that list. I mean, that couldn't I couldn't agree more with that. I
Yeah.
think this requires a high degree of resilience. I think the one thing I would add there is risk tolerance.
Yes.
I don't see myself as a high risk person at all. I think, though, if you were to look at the spectrum of humanity, I'm probably in the top 20%.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm okay with risk where it has been an informed choice, where and I know that I can have a good probability of moving from point A to point B, then I'll take a risk. I think I underestimated for a long time that that's not how most people are. I kind of
A
thought they were
hundred
wired the same
percent. I
because I
couldn't
I
agree.
look at people that are like I look at people who let's take founders looking for big exits. I think those people have like top 1% levels of risk tolerance. And I was looking at them as the gauge for what's high risk. And I don't think that's really true. And I found too, like this idea of resilience and risk tolerance when I've had conversations with folks who are in corporate jobs who are sick of it and they're thinking through, is this the right move for me? I think the stuff you mentioned, they've got to learn how to do. But each of those things, I think you can learn. I think
Yeah,
even the community part, I think you can
for sure.
learn how to participate. But the resilience and risk, you have it or you don't have it. And being honest with yourself about that, I think is really an important consideration before you decide to make a jump. What do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that what you were saying about those that are in that top 1%, I feel like the leaders that I've worked with that are in that position, those are the ones that are so open to failing fast. And I think that's where the risk tolerance comes in. And I think if you're open to learning and being comfortable in that discomfort, you can also learn to be a little bit more risk tolerant to get you into that mind space is something that I've learned along this journey too, in getting exposure to different types of leaders, which has been really interesting.
So you've been doing this 2 years. Do you think your risk tolerance has changed?
Yeah. And I think part of it, like when I was thinking about some of the traits of the people that I have spoken with, and even just in my journey, it all ties back to what you were talking about. Like so many of my guests came from toxic corporate roles or places of burnout. And I think that self trust is also a super critical trait. Like, especially so, like, you have to have the self trust, you have to have that growth mindset and a bit of that resilience, especially as you move forward, because you're not getting the external validation or the review cycle or the promotion ladder that you might be used to getting in a corporate role. And if you were coming from a toxic corporate, whether it was an environment, a culture, or like your specific role, you've got to kind of get into a place of getting that self trust back. So I think that's another trait that's important is either earning that back and being comfortable to push yourself to get that back through a growth mindset or through that resilience if you have that.
Okay, I'm going to ask a personal question. And if this is too personal, we'll cut it. Okay. I don't know your story on if you were considering a move and then purposefully left a role or if you had exited and then found this as a job. But when you went through that moment, or actually before you went through that moment, and when you were in a corporate career, did you have that self trust inherently, or did you rely on the performance review cycle and the kind of talent management structures within your organizations to give you that, like personally? Did you operate in that way?
It's such an interesting question because I think if you would have asked me when I was in my corporate role, I think in the beginning through promotions, because I was somewhere for a very long time and got promoted into a senior role, I would probably have thought that I was doing it because I was being promoted both, right? Like not to give a non-answer, but it was both. I knew I was doing great work and I was getting promoted for it because of the culture and because I should have. But then after I exited, I realized just how toxic of a culture I was in, and I realized that I really needed to get that, like, professional ego back, for lack of a better term. Like, I needed to really, like, build that back up. So I realized that I was in the same boat as many of the people that I was interviewing, was that I had left a completely toxic corporate environment. I knew that I wanted to go down the fractional path, and that's actually why I started the podcast, was that I just started having these exploratory conversations and was so impressed with the people that I was meeting and the insights that I was gathering, that I was like, why am I keeping all of this information to myself? I should be sharing this with others that are on the same journey as me. It was never meant to be anything other than that, just like kind of giving back to the community that was giving so much to me. And so, and in turn, it was helping to build back my confidence and also helping, like I said, to give back to the community. And at one point, I just asked a couple of people if I could record the conversations, and the rest is history. But all that to say, I think it has helped in a way to not only through the client work and exposure to a fresher set of leaders and teams, but it's really helped to kind of shed that corporate skin that I was in for so long, that I think is what is attracting so many people to this new path.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny as you were talking, it sounds to me from your answer like when you were in a measured performance structure, you knew it was a necessary evil, or maybe
Yeah.
not even an evil, but like a tool. It was the rungs on the ladder, and that's how it's measured, and thus it mattered. But you didn't gain like, you weren't reliant on it for your own beliefs about your work.
No.
Okay, that's what I think too. Like for me, if I look back, and for me, it's a longer time. Okay, I've been doing this for 11 or 12 years. I mean, it's a long time. And it was obviously like a different career stage when I left. I never put any thought or second thought about what my performance review said. It mattered to me only because it was like this annoyance that had to happen of people telling me what they thought. And in the best working relationships I had, we were both on the same plane. Like, okay, we know we got to do this, but you're a 4. Be happy with
Right.
a 4. Or you're a 5 this year, whatever. Like, or you sucked this year, which I think maybe
Hmm.
happened one year. But I never put any stock in it, and so maybe that speaks to this idea of self trust. I do think your second point, though, is really important, especially for people who are leaving leadership roles. Much of your beliefs in yourself are shaped by your environment. And if your environment has you close to the top of a pyramid, you believe that you're close to the top of the pyramid. And when there is no pyramid, how do you construct your beliefs? Like, how does the ego work? And so, therefore, this concept of self trust becomes so much more important because you don't have a proxy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I
Yeah. I
didn't
think
intend to, you go ahead.
No, I think it's an important conversation, because I really do think that it is a theme that comes up often, that whether it's a toxic corporate environment or people left their roles because of burnout, which I think it was such a hot topic for such a long time that sometimes I even like think the phrase was it's just I'm burned out of the phrase burnout, but it's real. There's a lot of people that are entering into this profession because they think that it's going to be this fix all, like, flexibility and things like that. But if you have come from a place of corporate toxicity or burnout, might actually it gives you the propensity to actually lean in more when you are an entrepreneur. And that's one of the things that I think is underestimated when people set out to do this work, is that boundary setting is critical.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
I think every single time that I'm in like a webinar, like a fractional webinar or community, and people are like, the top 5 reasons why I'm doing this is I own my own time, I have flexibility. And I'm like, you must be either further along or like one of the best like time blockers in the world, because or maybe you aren't coming from the place that I am still at, but boundary setting is just so important. And I think that unclear boundaries can affect you either like from obviously on your own personal side in your time. It can affect your business in terms of you're running a business. You have to get your invoices out. You have to manage your clients. You have to do all these, but also from a client perspective, it can lead to scope creep and unclear expectations and all of the things that can easily set you up for failure in terms of not getting the referrals that you want to ask for at the end of an engagement or many different things. And so that's where I think there is a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding for people that are just starting out to really know. And so, one of the things that I've tried to do to combat that is I have a Post-it that is on my monitor of just the things that are very clear boundaries for me, like things that are non-negotiables that I will block my calendar for, that I just won't allow people to take. So, there's just clear boundaries that I have set, and I've really done a pretty good job of sticking to them. Obviously, if there's a board meeting or a client emergency or something, it's always going to shift and morph, and I can adjust, but I try to stick pretty true to those.
Funny that you mentioned that. The 2 by 2 newsletter that's coming out, we just wrote it, so coming out in the next few weeks, should be out by the time this podcast is live, is about this exact topic. And I push it further because I have a hypothesis that boundaries are critical for profit, and that
Mm,
the greater you stick to your boundaries, the greater potential you have for profitability, because
couldn't
your
agree more.
boundaries force you to do the right thing in the time that you've allotted to do it. And they force you to be you call it time blocking. I will say I am top 1% at time blocking, top 1%. No question about it in my mind. I also I had a joke that I think will maybe even be like the title of the article. I had boundaries when I was 8 months old. Like I was standing up in the crib with boundaries. Like it's just like one of those things. In fact, the reason I couldn't have boundaries was the reason I walked away from my job. Like, I don't have this problem at all. But I think that it's like looking back on it a decade later, I do think it's one of the critical factors to my success is that I had to find a career where I could, this natural box I have to live in could exist, because my stress level from people trying to push into my little box drove me batshit crazy.
Yeah,
So, but I
I
know people
love it.
struggle with that.
I love it. I couldn't agree more. I am a big proponent of like, so A, I could not agree more. I think the boundaries definitely align to profitability and revenue, because the more that you have boundaries, the more you come in as a fractional, as the true strategic leader that you are. Like, you're not going in and you're saying, so I'm a fractional CMO. I'm not going to come in and say, I'm going to drive your marketing or build your marketing strategy. And then I'm stuck doing all the execution, because that just devalues me both then and in the future. I also feel like I am a huge proponent of why I talk about pricing so much. A is just that it's important for all of us as fractionals, but I also think that that elevates the whole fractional game as a whole, right? So if you end up going in and being able to price yourself as a true strategic leader, that means that everyone else that is going in and, like, putting in their proposal for the same project is going in at that same high strategic price point, right? So it elevates everyone as fractionals in the community versus having someone that might be a more execution focused fractional coming in and completely underbidding a project. It devalues fractionals as a complete entity in a community. And then none of us that are truly at the strategic level will ever be able to go in and win work. So I
Yeah.
think that's why pricing is also so important. It's not like we could ever align on one band, but if you go in, and the whole value to me of fractional is that you're getting someone that has 20 plus years of expertise. You get that expertise. You don't need us for full time, and it's a real price value equation, but it has to be that strategic role.
Let's go back to pricing. That was your first insight, and you've given us some insights there. What else have you actually, this is what I want to know. What do you see? I think it's helpful for people to know, like, this is what good looks like, but this is what not so good looks like, so you can kind of see which way you're trending.
Yeah.
What are the things that you've seen which are like what not so good looks like?
Yeah. From a pricing perspective, I've seen a lot of different things. So, what I hear most is people going into projects and saying, I know I should be charging more, but, and then they're literally acknowledging that they're devaluing their services. And so I think that is something that I hear time and time again. And so, you have to value for the services that you're providing. It feels vulnerable and scary, but fractional isn't a new thing now, and I'm feeling more and more comfortable with the leaders that are putting RFPs out there or are actively engaging and putting posts up there for fractional roles. They have a price point in mind. They're not putting them out there now and just kind of seeing the range of what they're going to get. So like price to the value that you know you're worth for your years of experience. I do think that you have to have a little bit, I mean, obviously you have to know who you're pricing for. So I always do take into account obviously the size of the company and you have to know, what the actual scope is. But I think you have to know what your value is and price to that.
If you don't know the answers to those questions, time gives you the answers. But if you haven't had that luxury yet, have you found any sources or having any advice for folks where they might get a little bit of insight around that?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of communities out there where people are so helpful and they share information so openly is something that I found in the community. Yeah, I'm a member of several of them. So, we met through Chief. There's a great fractional community there. I'm a member of CMO Coffee Talk. There's a great fractional community there. Fractionals United. There's plenty of others out there that are on Facebook. Some are on Facebook that are migrating to LinkedIn. Anyone within those communities will be willing to either share sample proposals or have a conversation with you offline to walk you through a pricing strategy to make you feel more comfortable. I mean, obviously, you can also just like many people are now going to ChatGPT, right? And
Yeah,
uploading their stuff. And so that's also kind of run some tests to see how, if that is relevant and it's pretty on point versus where it was a year ago. So,
that's
but the
really interesting.
community I find is helpful. Like I have many members of the community where we would, consider ourselves to be competitors and we meet once a month. I refer them business when I don't have capacity and vice versa. We share contractors, we share networks. It isn't like the corporate rat race. It's a very open and giving community.
I think that's true too. Are in the process of building, we've been vibe coding for 5 months. And it's like one of these things where we're so close and I just can't give it up. But we've been vibe coding a fractional pricing calculator. And we did an independent consultant version and then we did a fractional executive version because the pricing has a bit of a different underlying factor about because fractionals, you may have multiple clients at the same time, and how much time you dedicate per month
Yep.
will impact your rate one way or another. For
Mhm.
independent consultants who are typically working on a project basis, like that's not a factor. So there's two versions for slightly different groups of people, but it's it's based on like kind of what I've seen in the market. It's interesting. I should run it through ChatGPT. I think it's about 85% accurate at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
that's really interesting. That's
but
really
it gives
interesting.
people a starting point, like even I sometimes, like I will find that depending on, so you mentioned the time is a factor, time commitment certainly is a factor, but the company you're working for, I have found that there's a couple of variables. And I'll say what I found, and then you can say if you think this is accurate in your experience or not. One, the industry really does matter. The
Yeah.
particular, and I can group these industries at the very tippy top of price point is anything related to private equity. Like they will pay rates that nobody else will pay because they're judging you versus McKinsey. So that's top tier. Falling down from that, you have anything in technology, some segments of healthcare, like more technology focused segments of healthcare, anything in a quote tech industry, such as fintech, prop tech, insure tech, all of these groups, those are tech companies. So they tend to pay a bit more. And then financial services. Below that, you've got the rest, right? Industrials, manufacturing, kind of old school businesses. So that's another variable. Then okay, this is what my experience is, but depending on what type of work you do, the rates are really different. And I think it's because of competition. So we at Keenan Reed do not do quote marketing because it pulls our rate down. We
Mhm.
do financial work, we do strategy work, we'll do the strategic or financial business model processes behind product work, but we don't do
Mhm.
marketing. We also, below the marketing tier, is I think anything related to talent.
Mm.
So all of the people roles, the HR roles, and I think it's just because of competition. Like there's a lot of people in that space, and therefore you've got people with lower rates, you're competing. It's very different than if you're a pricing specialist And so you've got some rate variation in there as well. And that to me is like really wide. The other one is location. Obviously, I mean, this is like kind of a no brainer, but like New York, San Francisco, I assume to be the highest, and they are. I didn't realize LA would be as high as it is. But anyone I've met in Los Angeles gets a rate just like the Bay Area. Following down from that, you've got kind of the Seattles, which I think is driven by tech. Um,
Yeah.
what's interesting to me is like the Midwest, and even Chicago is still a bit lower. Like I think you can get a higher rate in Dallas than you can in Chicago, certainly like South Florida than in Chicago. So
So
there is, and
interesting.
then, if you go out from that to smaller tier cities, obviously the rates are going to change a lot. But like you wouldn't know those variables if you weren't talking to other people who were working kind of in these very discrete environments.
Yeah.
Am I right or wrong?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think you're
I,
definitely right.
I wave a huge flag on price. I think you should price as high as you possibly can at all times.
I think so too. I think so too. And I think there's like a couple of other things that I feel like I've learned too is to make sure that you're really thinking through the full terms of the contract as well. Like I
Yes.
think
Oh
we
my
often
God.
get so focused on like what is my monthly retainer going to be, which by the way, it should never be like project based as a fractional or hourly based as a fractional. So like what is your monthly retainer that people just think like, "Oh, okay. Yay, I'm going to go in at the high price point and I got that and that's all I need." But then take into consideration the fact that they might ask you to travel and that should be billed as a completely separate line item. You should have a separate day rate if your
Yes.
client asks
Okay.
you to. So that's something that I feel like a lot of people miss as well. So, and that was a mistake that I made of mine in my first couple of contracts. I didn't even think about it. I think I got into the whole like, oh, okay, like I went in at this high price point and I nailed it. And then all of a sudden I was traveling like 8 days out of the month. And it was completely eating into my other client work, the quote unquote hours that I had dedicated to the client, and I wasn't getting compensated any differently. And
Yeah.
so that is something that I have changed in my contracts. Also, like making sure that you're putting in vacation time into your contracts as well.
Let's talk about niching.
Mhm.
Oh, even when we say, so you made a point when we started talking that you find people tend to start niche and expand. Have a
Oh,
really hard time. I had a really hard time niching down myself. What are you saying that, like, what does good look like here for you?
yeah, so I feel like it's almost like an hourglass. Like, I think they start broad and then they find their niche, and then I feel like once they found it and they start to grow, I feel like they start to, like, wanna go out again a little bit. Not Yeah, that's what I feel like I have seen. Where I feel like people have so much success is I mean, and, like, you see it even on, like, the chief calls, right? When people can get on the line and say, I'm a fractional CMO for small to mid-size professional services organizations.
Yeah,
It's
then people know what you
memorable, you
do.
know exactly who they serve. They would know that you are that person to call. If
That's the important part.
Yeah, and, like, if that's something where they know that they have people in their network or that is what they do, it's an instant connection on LinkedIn. Like, it's just that works, right? And then that's where the referrals keep coming, and that's where the connections are made, and that's the key, right? So, I think having that very specific
Yeah, I find it's
knowing it's I mean, it's classic marketing, right? Like, knowing who your ideal customer profile is and how you are going to serve them with what offers and the pain points that you're gonna help them solve is the key to success.
Amanda,
All good.
you're a marketer for professional services firms. So it would be derelict of duty if I did not ask you how professional services providers should be marketing themselves. What advice do you give us? Let's start with the people who are kind of starting out to perhaps they haven't reached full capacity. And then I think it would be good to contrast that with someone like yourself who is at full capacity. What's the marketing that you keep doing? And within this, my question is always, what should someone not waste time on? Like you and I have talked about, if we get another HubSpot question from someone who is not like running a $10 million company, quit the HubSpot. So, what do you
Yep.
advise us?
Oh my gosh, yes. So, yes, drinking my own Kool-Aid, right? It's our marketer's favorite phrase. But I think for somebody that is either just starting out or isn't at full capacity, I think the advice I would give, place to start is really like clarity and conversations, right? So we've talked a lot about with the generosity of the community, but I think just people in general, I'm like a big believer that like in general people are good humans, but like you don't need a full brand or content engine when you're first starting out. What you need to do is clearly articulate like who your target is, the problem that you're going to help them solve, and then start with one strong point of view that you can take to a handful of intentional outreach conversations. And then to me, that will outperform months of passive posts on
Mm.
LinkedIn. So I would say
What is
like
the point of
clarity in
LinkedIn for you?
conversations and killing time on the couch, I think, and maybe getting annoyed at what other people are posting. I mean, I do post, right? Like I post about the podcast, but I feel like every single time that I try to think about writing something, I'm like, who really cares? So I think that's kind of like my next phase because like I am at capacity, which like knock on wood, I'm like so thankful that I am. But I did feel like when I started thinking about the next stage of growth, I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to have to shift from like conversations to like credibility building, right? So I can pick up and just on the what waste
Mhm. What
time.
wastes, let's see, here we go. What do you find wastes time?
I think the biggest waste of time, and I think we joked about it before, and I think a couple times during the pod, but like writing a LinkedIn post for quick eyeballs when it doesn't say anything is such a pet peeve of mine. Or like creating a Substack and then just like never writing anything. Just like basically like platform or trend chasing instead of doubling down on what you know, just in general, like creating content that's not targeted or relevant. I think that's just like the marketer in me. I feel like I see it so often, but yet I like continue to go to LinkedIn, right? Like it's one of my top apps that I just kind of peruse, but I don't know. I'm so curious to know like how that might be helping people, like certain people that I see posting more often than not. I do know that there's, obviously it's where fractionals get work. It's where you can build credibility and visibility and things like that. But I think you have to follow like a certain formula in order for it to work well.
Yeah, I see it as your profile is your landing page, and therefore it is the source of your credibility. The feed is primarily, I do think it has a purpose. We use it. I think we need to,
Yeah,
I think we used to use it really well. I think we got away from that and now need to go back to this, which is it is, and the subs, you mentioned a Substack or a newsletter. I think it's important for people to see your name, like simply to see your name to keep you top of mind, your name in the feed or your name in the inbox. And that's not because they're reading your posts, it's because it's top of mind. So the only reason your post needs to be like, what do you need to optimize your post for? It's the algorithm. It's getting your name in the feed,
yeah,
not for even if someone reads it or clicks.
totally.
But my pet peeve is a shitty website. Like if you have like
Mm,
you've designed it in lavender and you've put cursive on it and it says absolutely nothing or it says generic slop, I just am like, this is a credibility killer. I just recommend people don't have
yeah,
one. Like it's too
yeah,
risky. A worse one is killer and
yeah,
nothing. And a good LinkedIn page is easy. And a good LinkedIn page is really easy to build now with ChatGPT. So
yeah,
stop the website madness. That's my
yeah.
my goal. Well, I'll end it here. Amanda, you're great. I really appreciate it. And people, please, listeners, the Female Fractionals is not just for free females. If you are a fractional male, you're going to learn a lot from the guests on the podcast. And I really appreciate you giving us the time today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was
All
great.
right. Bye. That's a pod.